Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, so I think we have more microphones, so we're going to see if that works. If all else fails, we're recording the Zoom, and we can post that and connect it so folks can still see it. I guess the sound wasn't working very well at all for the live broadcast. So let's continue.
Okay. Are there any corrections to the minutes from? I'm sorry. What was the date on that? It was June 8th, 2021. No. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written from June 8th, 2021.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That looks unanimous for those in attendance, right? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Are there any informational items from staff?
Not at this time.
Okay, this is an opportunity to comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Because this is a hybrid meeting, we will accept comments via Zoom and in person. If you wish to comment and are attending the meeting on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature to indicate that you wish to make a comment, or press *9 if you're connected to Zoom over the phone to raise your hand. We will also check to see if there are any audience members who wish to attend in person.
So, Chair, there are no attendees here in person, and there aren't any attendees via the Zoom either.
Okay. Then we'll move on to work session items. The work session tonight is to discuss draft code and map amendments developed to begin implementing sections of the comprehensive plan. Senior Planner Vera Colias will present the information for discussion. Vera?
All right, thanks very much, everyone. We are going to be discussing batch number 2 of code amendments tonight, and I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to try to share my screen through the television. Just a second. It's a little, okay, let's see if I can make this work. It's like an eye test. Are folks able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Great, thank you.
You can.
Trying to
Listen very carefully.
It's not the presentation view.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to open up here.
Okay.
Yep, sorry. I've got 2 laptops that I'm working with here. Trying to.
It's like being a DJ.
A little bit. Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Great.
And this is the presenter view, so we get your slide. Or your slide
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I was afraid that was going to happen. And slideshow. Okay. Let's do this. I can fix this. Hold on.
I think if you start the presentation first and then go into screen sharing, you'll have an easier time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So actually start the presentation first? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But, all right. Yeah, but, oh, okay, I see. Sorry. This one? Let's try this. See if this works. Does that look like it should at this point?
It's still loading. Yes, that's perfect.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Good job.
Well, okay. Let me take this opportunity to thank the commissioners for their patience with the technology. It's really weird to be working off the television and all of these other things in here, so thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Okay. Let's see if I can advance the slides without, yeah, that's why I don't like this. All right. Nope. This one? Yeah. It's not advancing for me. That's the problem. Yeah,
They won't let you advance them if they're not what you're trying to do.
that's exactly what I'm trying to do. But because it's that screen, I don't even have a mouse here.
Can you slide it by any chance?
No, it's not that kind of a screen.
Can't just hit enter?
Yeah, it won't advance for me. Because of the way the sharing works. Shoot. Yeah, I don't even know where there, okay, let's try this. Did it advance?
No.
There.
You go. Wow.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're here to talk about the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Project, Phase 1. The goal of the project is to implement first phase of comprehensive plan policies related to housing, trees, and parking. Again, we have some policy mandates from the comprehensive plan for this project, which are to increase the supply of middle housing and provide housing choice throughout the city, to increase the tree canopy and preserve existing trees, again, throughout the city, and to manage parking, to enable middle housing, and to protect trees. One of the things that we chatted about on Thursday, at Thursday's meeting, was just to kind of walk through a little bit or summarize the various public engagement activities that have happened as part of this project, which started in earnest last August. So we've been working on this project for about a year now so far. And so as part of the public engagement, we had a comprehensive plan implementation committee made up of residents of the city, a volunteer committee. So we had 9 meetings with CPIC, as we called them. We had 2 different project web pages that provided updates to the project. Those were the City of Milwaukee homepage or regular sort of web page for the project. And then we used Engage Milwaukee, which is a community engagement platform that allowed us to do our open houses and post information, collect comments throughout the project. We did a monthly article in the pilot newsletter, which is mailed to all addresses within the city. We did stakeholder interviews last October with 32 different interviewees. And then we had our virtual open houses, both in English and in Spanish. And those virtual open houses on the Engage Milwaukee site also came with printed materials, all in English and in Spanish. So we had, and we wanted to make sure that we had the open house information in printed versions as well, in case folks didn't have easy access to the internet. So we had translations for all of those items. We did community surveys as part of those open houses, again, in English and in Spanish. We did many email blasts and social media posts throughout the project to get folks to participate in our open houses or just to know about the project. Again, we had handouts both in English and in Spanish that we had available and continue to have available at the library, the farmer's market, at Hillside. We had those distributed to all the residents. At the Wichita Center, we included inserts in the meal baskets and boxes that they had there, as well as Northwest Housing Alternatives. We had NDA presentations with each of the NDAs a couple of times throughout the project. And then we had small group discussions in both Spanish and in English. And then, of course, we had our monthly updates at both the Planning Commission and the City Council to keep the project moving forward and letting folks know what was happening with the project. So we believe that we did a pretty good job, or I think we did a good job of getting the word out about the project and making sure that folks knew what was happening. And that's just basically to date. Then we will still have our engagement that we will need to get the word out for the public hearings when they begin in October. So we will have sort of a separate plan for getting the word out for the public hearings as well, when those start with the Planning Commission in October.
And Vera, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
me just reaching out for just for a second, I just want to let everybody know that we can't see the Zoom attendees.
Right.
So if anyone needs to, would like to speak, please just say, hello, I would like to speak, because we can't actually see anyone. Just wanted to make that clear. So
Right.
if you have any questions, you're just gonna have to interrupt, I think. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll try to keep an eye for raised hands, or any of the commissioners trying to get your attention as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph, I appreciate that. Are there any questions about the public engagement piece of this so far? Anything about any of this? I kind of went through it pretty quickly, but we did quite a bit, I think. Okay. All right. So the code review schedule, back on Thursday, we talked about the comprehensive plan, and land use map, the zoning map, permitted uses, some of the definitions. We talked about parking, ADU review, and the design development standards that accompany ADUs. Tonight, we have on, as part of this batch 2, flag lots and back lots, natural resources code, and Title 17 as it relates to land division. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll be back. We'll talk a little bit more about code, and we'll be talking about the tree code with Peter Passarelli, and we'll talk about design and development standards for middle housing. Okay. So we've discussed flag lots and back lots a couple of times with the commission. What you see here on the screen are some aerial photos with the neon blue outlining on the left the flag lots. So it's a lot that's actually shaped like a flag with a pole. So there's actual frontage as part of the parcel itself on a street. And on the right, you see what are considered back lots. So it's a landlocked parcel behind a lot. And you can see on that photo, the driveways that access those lots, those are easements. So it's not actually part of the property itself, the access to the street, it's an easement over the front lot. And as we've discussed before, flag lots and back lots are an opportunity for more infill housing and, you know, what some might call, quote unquote, hidden density, because these houses are sort of tucked into the back and they're not visible from the street. We talked at a previous work session sort of about the history of flag lots in the city, and the code has kind of gone back and forth a bit about having standards that make flag lots a little bit easier to build, and then that they're actually a little bit more difficult to build. And that has to do with some of the standards that have developed that we have currently in our code related to the width of the pole, how the minimum lot area is calculated, and the setbacks for the home that's in the back, that's actually on the flag lot. They are wider or larger than a standard lot in the same zone. So we wanted to talk a little bit about this. Some of the proposed language that was attached to the staff report is trying to get to this notion of incentivizing middle housing on these flag lots and back lots. And some of the ideas are to reduce the setbacks on the flag lots for middle housing, reducing it down to the front and the rear setbacks to 20 feet as opposed to 30 feet, which it is now. And there's some other ideas about how to actually measure the minimum lots. Oh, sorry, we'll just kind of go to this right now. I forgot how my slides were set up, apologies. So one of the ideas for these incentives, or the idea was can we make development a little bit easier on these lots, but only for middle housing? That was something that we talked about. Is that a way to incentivize the development of middle housing on these flag lots and back lots? So one of the things that we wanted to talk about with the commission is should we allow a smaller front yard setback for the rear lot? And that's something to think about. Is the front setback one to reduce as opposed to, you know, the rear as well? You know, where's the yard that folks will really be enjoying on one of these back lots. It's generally the rear setback, that backyard. So it was something that we wanted to talk about with the commission. Should we allow a smaller front yard setback for the rear lot? Do folks have thoughts about this, or we can sort of continue through the slides for the flag lots, and then I can unshare, and then we can talk about the flag lots all together. So
I'm gonna,
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm sorry, I can't see anybody, so I'm just gonna interrupt here with my question. I
Yeah.
apologize. Could you please explain for us one more time the definition of middle housing?
Oh, sure, of course, I'm sorry. Yes, the definition of middle housing, or the kinds of housing types that we are talking about, are duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhouses. So those are the housing types that are under the umbrella for middle housing. Should we continue through the slides? Is that what, Chair Edge, is that what I
Yes,
understood?
please.
Okay, great, thank you.
Vera,
Yeah.
this is Robert, one question.
Sure.
So, the idea, I think I heard from you, is that, the residents of the middle housing that's, in the flag part of the flag lot, you expect them to, the thought being that the rear setback would be where they might enjoy, more privacy in their, I'll call it, for lack of better words, backyard. And then the front setback would be a shorter distance, ostensibly because you expect that they would not use that because there's another dwelling right in front of their house. Is that the thinking?
That's the thinking, correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was,
So, I started nodding my head, and then I started thinking about, well, that would reduce the distance from what I'll call the original, house, the original, structure. That would reduce, I don't know, their buffer between that and the house, ostensibly, again, being their backyard. So, that kind of sounds like a catch-22. Am I seeing that right?
you're right, that's the trade-off. Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
right, yep.
Okay.
Vera,
Thank you for that clarification.
Vera, if I may though, there are rear setbacks that are in all the code that is 20 foot,
Correct,
right, from the back of the house. So you could say, oh, it's taking away from the original house backyard, but technically by right, they only have 20 feet to where the next yard would start. So
right,
it's not really taking away their backyard, but it's just giving it more space to be able to fit something onto a lot, I think.
Yep.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Massey?
Yeah, I understand your rationale. I'm just not sure that translates into, real world applicability,
Well, what happens is that in all reality, if you were to build a regular house back there in a flag lot, you would have to cut the original house backlined at 20 foot anyways, to be able to get your measurement to what is 30 foot now on a single-family dwelling. So you have to, if somebody wants to do something in their back lot of the original house, they would have to cut their yard at 20-foot setback anyways to get a line to measure from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And those are just minimums.
Those
Correct.
Those are just minimums,
Right. Okay. And we can obviously circle back to this. One of the other, ideas that we wanted to put forward was, again, to incentivize middle housing, was to allow the pole portion of a flag lot to count towards the minimum lot size calculation for the lot. Right now, the pole does not count towards minimum lot size. But one of the things that we wanted to explore was the idea of allowing the pole to actually count towards that lot size. Again, providing some more flexibility in creating lots, in the back, or to be able to create flag lots. So sort of taking away that, or not needing to, discount the flagpole area from the overall lot area, for the flag lot. So that was the next key question, to ask about on that.
Chair Edge, if I may, if nobody else has their hand raised, I have a question on this.
Go ahead.
So I live on a flag lot, and my pole is counted as the square footage of my lot.
So it, as far as, is it part of your lot? Of course it is. But the way our code is written, when you're establishing whether or not the flag lot meets the minimum lot size, the pole does not count towards that. So the portion of your property, or the flag portion of your property, needs to meet the minimum lot size without the pole.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's
Oh,
what we
okay,
mean.
all right.
So, sorry, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear in the discussion. So the idea is that when calculating the minimum lot size for the flag lot, this idea, or this question, is about not counting, or being able to count the pole towards that minimum lot size.
Which would generally get you about 300 square feet, I'm
It
guessing.
depends, yeah, on how
Depending on
deep
how
the lot
deep
is, sure.
the lot is.
And for some, designs, it matters.
Right.
Not always, but sometimes it's sort of that's the deciding factor of whether or not a flag lot can be created, without that area.
Okay,
That's the idea, yep.
thank you.
Sure. And then the next idea, again, as we've discussed before, was this idea of allowing backlots. Again, for middle housing, that these would be lots that could be, created that wouldn't need the pole at all. They would essentially be a rear lot or a back lot that would be accessed via an easement across the front portion, the front lot. So, so allowing these kinds of lots, we don't allow these right now. And then also the idea of allowing back lots in new subdivisions. Currently, flag lots are prohibited, in new subdivisions. These flag lots that you see on the screen right here are from the Cheragino Farms subdivision. It's a new subdivision, and back lots are permitted, in new subdivisions in the county. So we have an example right now of a new development that incorporated back lots into their design, and added, essentially, well, from what you can see, there are 5 back lots as part of this subdivision. So 5 additional lots were able to be created as part of this subdivision because, back lots, are permitted, in the county. So the question from staff is, should we allow back lots in new subdivisions, as part of our code amendments for back lots? And then, so those are the key questions for flag lots and back lots. I will note that we did, as part of this discussion, Commissioner Sherman is not able to attend tonight, but he did send substantial comments and questions about this particular topic, and certainly related to community engagement and public outreach for folks that live on lots that could include flag lots and so on. Staff has not done targeted outreach to properties that could include flag lots. We haven't done that. There are certainly a good number of them in the Ardenwald neighborhood based on that plat that we've shown as an example, but we haven't done a search or an analysis of every lot in the city that could be a flag lot. There are certainly more than just the ones that are obvious in Ardenwald, but staff has not done sort of that kind of targeted outreach. It's a fair question, and Commissioner Sherman included a link to some of the work that the city of Portland is doing with flag lots and back lots. I was not familiar with that, so I looked at that a little bit. I didn't have a ton of time yesterday afternoon to look at it, but there's some really good ideas in there. So this is certainly something that we can explore. It's not something that we would have time to do effectively within this process where we are right now. So I think I'd like to hear what the commissioners think about this and what you think we might do. Certainly flag lots are allowed in our code right now. So what if if the idea is to do more targeted outreach, to pursue this idea of these flag lots, incentivizing, you know, ideas or back lots, we can certainly do that. We can just pull this piece of it out of the code amendments and tackle that as a, you know, as sort of a separate project and come back to that, at another time when we've had more time to do that kind of outreach. That's fine. Sort of, you know, whatever, the commission, you know, would like to, what kind of direction you'd like to, give us, on that. And Laura, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, but that's, I mean, a lot of great points in there, certainly. So, happy to talk about it.
Did you want to stop sharing for a minute so we
Yes.
can,
Do that?
Before we stop sharing, can I have her
Please.
flip the screen just back
Yep,
to where you showed the flag lot? Oh, right there.
this one, yep.
That picture is inaccurate, correct? That driveway can't actually exist in that front house?
In the front house?
Yes, if you have a flag lot, doesn't the access to the front, if the easement is in the back, doesn't the access to the, other house have to be not from the street, but from the pole?
Oh, so, yeah, generally, and this was a graphic solely for graphic purposes, so apologies for that. It shouldn't have been, it wasn't intended to show all of the things. Generally, our code wants those driveways to be combined. So you're right. It doesn't always work out,
Right.
but yes.
I mean, I
yeah.
prefer that picture as code, much more than I prefer the access off of the flagpole, but that's,
Right, so yes, good point. No, it's a good point, Commissioner Humer. Thank you, yeah.
all right, I just wanted to
yes.
make sure I saw that, and I just,
Yep, no, you're right. I picked that graphic solely as a general graphic, not for accuracy, so
Okay.
thank you for pointing that out. No,
Thank you.
You are right. Okay, let me stop sharing so we can, let's see if, okay.
did you want us to, go through your questions in order or,
However you'd like. I mean, we certainly can. There's sort of a bigger question about the outreach and that sort of thing as well, so, but I can sort of leave that to you, but in order is fine, and then we can take Commissioner Sherman's comments as well, if that works for you folks. It doesn't need to be quite that rigid if folks have things to say, so, whatever you'd like.
Okay, so before I open up the floor, or, you know, ask the other commissioners for questions, one question I had is about non-conforming uses. And, you know, the fact, what happens when, like the Cherry Farms, where, you know, our code doesn't allow backlots, but then we, annexed in, new properties that are backlots. Obviously they don't conform to our code. What challenges does that present to a landowner, when, you know, maybe trying to do something, you know, with their lot in the future with the city, when they have a non-conforming situation like that?
It's a good question. It's one of these interesting nuances of Oregon law, and I'm happy to have the city attorney jump in when I go too far off. But when and there's Oregon law that speaks specifically to this kind of a situation where something is, there's a subdivision or something is permitted in the county and then comes into the city. And those properties enjoy the county requirements and standards for 10 years. And then they kind of revert back to the city standards. So for 10 years, those properties, anything that happens to them, if they wanted to build an addition or something, they need to meet the standards of the county for 10 years. And then at that point, then they're city lots, and then they would just be considered pre-existing non-conforming, and, you know, they get to exist. Certainly it's a permitted lot. It was approved, certainly in the county and brought in. So I don't know that I can think off the top of my head what kind of challenges that would create. I mean, it's an existing lot, that was permitted, and we've permitted, you know, building permits on them, of course. So, you know, we've gone along with all of that. But for 10 years, it's county standards. But if your question is sort of what happens in year 11 at that point, then we're reviewing those lots against our standards, understanding what the underlying, code was that created them in the first place.
Sure. So like if, they wanted to do an addition, onto their house, then we would understand that, they came in with a non-conforming situation. And if the side setback is too small compared to city code, they can't get any closer, right?
Right, that's right. Yep.
They could do an addition inside like the building envelope for what the city would normally allow.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Subject to lot coverage and all of those things, so, which the county has as well
Right.
for those lots too, so, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I
Commissioner
don't
Hemer,
really
were
have
you-
anything, I don't have really anything to add to what Vera said. I don't have my
Oh.
statute book in front of me, or I would give you a citation, to the statute, but Vera's correct. When it's these areas that are in our UGMA typically come in this way, where a developer starts the development process in the county. This is exactly what happened with Cherangino Farms. They then strike a deal to annex in, and they cover this statute. So they subdivided and did everything under the county process, and they enjoy that. So they're really not what we would consider a non-conforming use. They're just developed under the county process. A traditional
okay.
non-conforming.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Are there any other questions right now or comments, for Vera about backlots or flag lots? Commissioner Hemer, there we go. I see you now.
I'm sorry, I should have brought a sign with a yellow hand so that you could see. So,
That will be helpful. Just keep that in mind.
right? So we have in our code right now that flag lots, can be split in the back, as long as it has a 35 width driveway or pole,
25 for a single,
Right.
35 for a double.
right? So
Yep.
in these back lots, what width of the driveway are we giving it?
Yeah, in the proposed code language that we included had for the back lots, let me go to my code, sorry, that the minimum for the back lots was 20-foot paved width, I think it was. Let's see. Where am I? Back lots. The driveway serving a back lot has to have a minimum pavement width of 40 feet, maximum pavement width of 20 feet, and the easement for the access needs to be a minimum of 6 feet wider than the driveway throughout its entire length.
I'm sorry, say that, you said 30 feet?
So there's your driveway, the actual driveway, paved driveway, and then the easement itself.
No, I understand that,
Right.
but is it 20 feet or is it 30 feet?
It's not, the pavement width is between 14 and 20 feet. The easement is 6 feet wider than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so.
Yeah.
This is where I get confused about this back lot and flag lot. What is the difference between the two, that you need to have a skinnier driveway than you do for a dual flag lot? It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Are you suggesting that the flag lot be narrower then?
Or they at least be consistent.
Yeah, I mean, that part of the issue has been that, I mean, there's been some discussion that flag lots are difficult to develop, right?
Right.
Because we have these 25 and 30-foot standards and 35-foot standards. So, if the suggestion is that we narrow those up, I borrowed some of this backlot language from another community that allows backlots, and that seemed to make sense, and I covered it with the city engineer as well, but if the idea is to make them consistent, we can certainly do that. No, it's a good point.
Yeah, so that's
aren't
when
they?
I was
Yeah.
reading
Okay.
between this flag lot and these back lots, and I'm like, okay, well, what's really the difference between the two? And there really isn't a lot, except for the pole is owned by the front house versus the pole being owned by
Right,
the back house. And so the code should be consistent enough so that development can happen on both if the width of the driveway is a barrier,
Okay.
right?
Nope, that's a
It
good
would be
point.
my feeling on that.
Mhm.
Commissioner Hurt?
Yeah, you said that you looked at other communities to kind of see what language they used. I was just wondering what other communities, and then kind of as a follow-up question slash comment, have you looked at like Seattle Metro? Because as far as like Portland Metro goes, which we very much are, with the expansion and how many people have moved here, especially from out of state coming in, just increasing our population, especially Portland Metro condensed. Seattle did that 10, 20 years ago. And so I'm just wondering, like, have we really explored what phases they went through in their different codes to kind of account for so many people kind of moving into a city? I mean, they're just similar to us. So my first question being like, what areas are you borrowing this code language from and looking at? And also, is Seattle or someplace like that, have you looked there?
I have not looked at Seattle, so that's an easy one to answer. I did not. And when I put out some questions to the Oregon Planners listserv, so we have a listserv email address where you can just ask planners different questions. And this was one of the ones that we asked about when we were first in work sessions with the Planning Commission, you know, and with the city council, kind of what are the pros and cons, you know, to flag lots, back lots. I was asking different planners, you know, do you allow these? What are your standards? What has your experience been? So I looked at their code. So I was looking at Canby, the county, because I'm more familiar with their standards now, having reviewed Cheragino Farms. And I believe it was I think it was either Tigard or Wilsonville. It might have been Tigard, I think. So those planners got back to me and I looked at their codes, but I didn't do an exhaustive search of flag lot and back lot standards. And again, I can certainly do that and look at other communities and how they've done that.
Not to add on to your plate or anything, I would just say that probably the smartest bet for us as a local community to look at is to find cities that were going through what we are going through right now 10, 20 years ago, and what directions and approaches they took and what worked and what didn't work. And for me, I lived up and down, you know, Seattle for 10 years and watched it happen 20 years ago there, what's happening here now. And so a lot of their suburb communities from Seattle, just like ours, kind of exploded and became, you know, more densely populated. And so I think that's obviously the city that I go to first in my mind, because I directly experienced it for the last 20 years there and watched I watched them do what Portland is doing. And so so finding a community that would have been similar to ours 20 years ago and seeing what they did, I think would probably be beneficial to our community, because I that's just what all of Portland Metro is doing right now, and it's probably going to continue. It's probably going to continue to be a challenge. I mean, we obviously have a little bit more challenges with like the prices of lumber and and everything else going on, but everybody has their thing. So, but yeah, I'd just say Seattle and different areas that have faced this kind of housing crisis and population explosion like we have, seen what they did and what worked and didn't work, you know, a decade or two ago would probably be helpful.
So Commissioner, are you referring specifically to flag lots and back lots and how other cities have handled that? Because that,
yeah,
okay.
Specifically, and then also kind of it fits into a broader conversation too.
Right, and I the city of Milwaukee's been doing flag lots, I think, for a pretty good amount of time, as a lot of other jurisdictions close by. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at it, I just think that we do have a lot of experience here in the region looking at this, and so I think we could look into a couple more places, but I just want to be careful not to add on a lot to Vera's workload at this point in time, just because we're in this kind of moment that we have to keep moving. But your advice is well taken, and we'll see if we can look at at least a couple of jurisdictions and see if they have any, what their standards are. And if they're radically different than ours, that would be good to know.
Yeah.
But I'd be surprised if they were, but we can at least look into a few.
I think you're right. I think it's kind of more of a broader broader subject too. So in addition to flag lots, as a broader, broader subject, but
Yep.
yes, I agree. I don't want to add any more onto Vera's plate.
No, and if I could just jump in on that, because when Commissioner Sherman sent his comments, he included a link to, what Portland is doing, and they have they've got multiple layers of different things that they're doing. They have, small lot flag lots that, the neck or the pole can be extremely narrow, if you actually don't even build a driveway. So they've added multiple layers onto their code requirements as well, and kind of not replicating Portland's code, that's not what I'm suggesting, but trying to see, is there room for some consistency within the region for what different communities are requiring, to take a look at that. But I haven't had a chance to review it, really carefully yet. So, but your point is well taken, where are there some models that we can take a look at beyond what I've already looked at. So no, you're not wrong on that for sure. Yeah.
So I have several comments or questions about the flag lots and back lots. I think first off, in terms of the driveway width requirement and being consistent with the flag lots, I thought the intention here was to specifically allow a different approach that would allow more flexibility than the flag lot standards currently allow. And I don't know if that means that we should change the flag lot standards to match this, or if this was really deliberately intended to stand apart from the flag lots as, a distinct approach that allowed for narrower driveways. The other thing that I was noticing when looking at the draft language is and I think we kind of approached, we dealt with this same thing a little bit in the comp plan policy language. It just feels like there's this negative tone, to the idea of flag lots and back lots. If you look at the protection of adjoining properties, section, it strikes me as weird language in our code that we would say that a residential use on each side of a property line means that we have to protect one of those residences from the other. I think privacy screening is a desirable amenity in its own right, and that we can simply have code that affirmatively requires privacy screening and set standards for that, rather than making it sound like it's, this detrimental use to the community that we have to protect the neighbors from. They're both residential uses on both sides. They're in the same zoning district. It's, it's housing. And so I don't think we need to protect housing from housing. And our code really sends a weird signal about that. So that was the thing I was thinking there. The other thing I'm wondering about is, I know that most of the lots in the city that we've been talking about, particularly I think in Ardenwald, as Commissioner Sherman pointed out, sure, there's a lot of those that are basically in, compliance with the general idea of city code. They're pretty close to the front, setback, from the street. You got a big, deep backyard. But as the city, over the next 20 years, annexes additional parts of its urban services area, which, can include some of these county lots that, were developed historically that might have the house set back a long way from the street. And so the parent lot, which would be the single unit dwelling of a potential flag lot partition, the back lot could already be the one that exists and is a single unit dwelling, not middle housing. And then the front lot would be where we would want, the middle housing. So I want to make sure that our code anticipates this scenario and make sure that we're not creating non-conforming scenarios. I know we can't anticipate everything, but I don't want a homeowner to have to jump through hoops to create middle housing and, you know, consistent with our policy, simply because, you know, we didn't anticipate a completely foreseeable scenario like annexing land in our UGMA. So I feel like the code should at least deliberately anticipate that scenario, perhaps, or at least help me understand how the code is anticipating that scenario already. And I'll feel a little bit better about that. I think that's it as far as this part of the code that we're looking at today. I have more comments about, you know, the other stuff that we'll talk about in a few minutes, I think. But as far as the back lots and flag lots, you know, I really wasn't on board with the idea of flag lots when we began this process, but after, you know, talking this through, I've really come around on it. And I, you know, really appreciate the work that you guys are putting into this. You know, I know it's been a sticky subject for the last, you know, generation or so here, not longer. And so I appreciate, you know, the effort that you're putting into approaching this, you know, sensitively.
I appreciate
So thank you for that.
your comments too, especially with the language with the neighboring housing versus housing. It gave me clarity too.
Right, and that language is in there, because I was you know, involved with the city back when flag lots became this big, huge issue. And that language is in there deliberately, because the residents at the time really wanted to protect that front house and make it harder to, you know, have flag lots, because they're afraid that everybody's privacy was gonna be interrupted and their lives were gonna severely change because of that. So I agree, there is a negative connotation that is kind of semi-written into that code, and it's because the writers at the time wanted to make their point of privacy to the surrounding properties.
And we feel confident we can go and take a look at that and try to erase that negative tone based on this conversation. Yeah, definitely.
No, it was a really good point to raise, Commissioner Edge. I think every time I read the code, I know what the code says, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I just, you know, I look at flag lots and, you know, and just do, you know, interpret the regulations as they are, but it's a really good point to see kind of what the tone, as you were reading it, I went through it and I realized, you're right, it's extremely negative. We should, let's take that down a little bit, I think. It's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And,
no.
you know, I think that it could just be a little bit straighter. You know what I mean? It's just plainer language, I think, rather than what it is. So.
Yep. I would agree.
Anything else on flag lots or back lots before we move on? Okay, I think we're good, Vera.
All right. And I don't mean to belabor the point, but can I ask about the commission's thoughts on Commissioner Sherman's email about how we should approach some targeted community outreach or public engagement? Are there thoughts about, you know, what sort of direction we ought to take on that? And I know he's not here, so that's hard, but yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Edge, I'm just trying to figure out the flow here. Or have we answered Vera's 3 or 4 questions? Vera, do you have an answer for those 4 questions?
I think, well, not specifically. I mean, is the general thought from the commission, the idea of how should we be handling the front yard setback, for example? You know, and you're right, so kind of a pointed, specific answer to the questions. I don't know that I have that, no.
Okay. So, Commissioner
So before
Edge,
we move on, yeah, we can address those.
Yeah, but let me just, let me go to, I do have a question, a point of clarification on the definitions, if I could go there. Is that appropriate at this point?
Sure.
Okay. So, when you look at, in the definitions, it's section 3 that says variance is prohibited. variances of lot area, lot width, and lot depth standards are prohibited for flag lots, and it says the same thing for back lots a little bit further on. And so I understand what we're trying to do with standards. Standards are standards. But at the same time, I'm also kind of skittish about never saying never, because you know, do we have that much, foresight that we can predict that there's not a need for a variance at some point?
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to agree with you. I'm kind of trying to walk this, balance this line between, having some respect for really the real recent generation of, feedback that we have from city residents on flag lots, and then this need to figure out how we can accommodate more housing, in our existing residential areas. And so it's like, I tend to agree. I feel like we need to allow for variances, but I feel like also that language was baked in there pretty deliberately. And so I'm certainly open to, being softer on that and allowing variances. They could be discretional, obviously coming through the planning commission, types of variances. But I'd rather it not be outright prohibited. Which I think is what you're suggesting as well, that maybe we allow a review process for, dimensional variances in the flag lot.
There's, at some point there may be a very good reason for it, and I would just hate for us to be in another situation as we've been in the past, where, we're painted into a corner by the code, and then we have to go out and do some, point code change to take care of one little situation. So I understand standards and I understand what we're trying to achieve, but I'm concerned that we're painting ourselves into a corner here.
Commissioner Hemer or Commissioner Ert, do you have any feedback on that?
Once again, like I said, it was 15, 20 some odd years ago, and some of those people that are on the planning commission then are now on city council now, so it'll be interesting how that plays out. But I totally love flag lots. I think it's the only way that you're going to be able to get the development that you want inside the city. And so, a little bit of variance is, I have when we get together and we share a beer, I will tell you the story of why we needed a variance at my house, which caused me an extra 6 months of not being able to move in, because we had to figure out how to change the line to get my 30 feet from my front door. So, we should be allowed to have some variances in there. And I am really confused of why we need a distinct definition between the back lots and the flag lots. I guess if it's because of the definition of who owns the driveway, then it should exist that way. But I think they should be consistent with each other, because really they are just one and the same thing, except for who owns the driveway. And it's kind of sad that, hey, if you do a flag lot, you have to do improvements to the street, but if you do a back lot, you don't have to do any improvements to the street, which doesn't make any sense either, because then everybody's just going to call it a back lot. So why even have the flag lots?
So I have a question about that, actually. If you're partitioning out a new lot that's a back lot, you still have frontage improvement requirements for the parent lot, right?
I think the way the city engineer would need to determine sort of what's the proportional amount of improvements. For a flag lot, for example, it's literally the frontage of the flag lot that you're responsible for. I think the city engineer and the engineering department would have to come up with a way of how they would assess, the proportionality. You're adding a dwelling unit. There would be improvements of some kind. I just don't know how the city engineer would be figuring it out, but I'm sure he would.
Wouldn't it be the same? I mean, because
Probably.
it's the same use.
Yeah,
it's
they would,
just owned by somebody different.
Right.
So it seems like it would be exactly the same.
It would likely be it would be that easement width is my guess, but we'd have
To your
to
point, to make it
determine that
consistent.
from the city engineer. And I think, and if I could just sort of on all of this, on this notion, I think it's important though to remember that without doing a flag lot, any one of these larger lots could still build middle housing in the backyard, right? They could still do a triplex or a quadplex and put additional units in the backyard. The difference here is how you can divide the lot. Can you put those units on their own parcel? And that's the difference. So, if we're, if it feels like we need to do, more work on how we're sort of tweaking the actual flag lot, back lot standards, that's fine. I just kind of wanted to make sure everyone, including anyone watching at home, that without doing these things, you can still build in the backyard. It's just a way of creating doing the partition itself. So I just wanted to make sure we weren't forgetting that part of it, I guess.
And then since I am a lover of flag lots, I don't know why we have to change, 20 feet actually makes sense because it's consistent with the code to the front, right? We haven't changed that, right?
Right. The
So it's-
setbacks, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so it's consistent with the house in the front. The 30 feet was written in to make it more difficult to put in a house. But I don't know why it can't be for single-family dwellings as well. Why we can't change the whole thing for, because, let's face it, you're not gonna get what people use the term as a McMansion, whatever that means, but you can at least, get, maybe a 2,000 square foot house or 1,500 square foot house back there, even if it isn't considered middle home, but it's certainly much more affordable than a 3,000 square foot house.
No, that was something that we, I'm interested to hear what the commission thinks about that. That was something that, I thought we had talked about, but I'm happy to, whatever direction the commission wants. Should we make the setbacks, the sort of the standard 20, for everybody, not just for middle housing? It's a good question. Should we be continuing sort of this idea of incentivizing middle housing or not?
Right, because that was the idea behind it,
Yeah.
was to incentivize middle housing.
Right.
To make it less,
Right.
right.
And I think that's appropriate given the policy context of the comprehensive plan. Commissioner Sherman, I think, raised the same point. Why wouldn't you be allowing single family or single unit dwellings on a rear lot? Why would you only allow middle housing on the rear lot? And that kind of raised the issue to me of the possibility of this non-conforming situation where we annex in a lot where the house has a deep setback, single dwelling has a deep setback, and then he puts the middle housing in front instead. And then, what does that scenario look like legally? So anyway, but I think I tend to agree, although, normally we would allow it, but it to just be a single unit dwelling, but I agree with the policy direction as well, and trying to find some way of making sure that we're creating actual incentives to private investors, helping the city fulfill its policy objectives. And so, and that means we want more middle housing, and so you can do middle housing on this type of a lot, but not a single unit dwelling, is an appropriate way of incentivizing that, I believe. Although I'm, certainly open to hearing what the other commissioners have to say on that as well.
You make a valid point, because really what happens is that, we have they're 70 foot wide by 200 foot deep. The house is generally set back probably 20 to 30 feet, maybe off the street in these larger lots, right? So that 20 foot probably makes a big difference to be able to get your square in there. And I guess you would encourage anybody who wanted to split off their lot and have development, you would probably encourage more middle housing than single family dwellings if you only did the 20 foot. But it's also market driven at the same point in time too, of what somebody is going to build or what somebody isn't going to build. And so you don't want to get trapped behind the market where now all of a sudden you have zero development of housing because the market has slowed way down duplexes and quadplexes are not the desirable unit.
I think they haven't been the desirable unit to build here in the city of Milwaukee because it's kind of challenging. And so I think that maybe removing the barriers would allow more of them to be developed.
Yeah, my point is that it's really economical based.
Right, yes, and I agree
so
with you.
the incentives, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like there's this moment of time where you start to try to see, when you make these changes to the code, the hope is that the market will kind of follow along, right? And that builders that haven't had to build these types of housing because it hasn't been required, or it hasn't been, you know, even an opportunity in a lot of places, that all of a sudden we're creating this opportunity, so maybe the market actually catches up a little bit to what the code is doing. I think that's part of the hope of this code, that we start to kind of change how the economics of it work, that you would have more developers trying to build these types of houses because there's such bigger opportunity to build these kinds of houses. At least that's the way I kind of think of it in my mind.
So the 20-foot in, right, is mainly there to have this incentive of your middle housing.
Yep.
And then if we move it for the single house dwelling, then what we're gonna end up with is probably more single house, dwelling.
Right.
Yep.
You know.
That's the theory now, right? We'll see if it changes over time. Like it might, we don't know what we're gonna get over time, right? So
I hear you, but, you know, I understand your motivation and your logic of the motivation, but it's really all economically driven anyways. So it's what buyers are willing to pay for and what buyers want, is what they are going to build. And, what I'd hate to see is happen is that the market, you know, slows down, and then you end up with zero development, which doesn't necessarily do anybody, any good, except it's just the way that it remains today. And I apologize for those who love it the way that it is today, but, you know.
So I have a hypothetical question here. So if we have the situation where we have a flag lot, and the building envelope, or you know, and so the building envelope for the single unit dwelling that's proposed would have to be within 20 or within 30 feet, but not less than 20, right? And so they technically are closer than the prescribed 30 feet for a single unit dwelling right now. But then we're also talking about allowing variances on dimensional standards for flag lots rather than maybe having them continue to be prohibited. And so it doesn't mean that you can't come in and build a single unit dwelling and put it 22 feet away. You just have to go through the variance process to get that variance.
Well, but then that ends up with the same question. Well, are we only gonna do variances for middle housing? Or are we gonna do variances for all flag lots? Right, I mean,
Well,
right, we're
ultimately,
back
all
to this
housing-
incentive question.
All new
And I don't know if
housing
that's
is
legal.
desirable.
yeah, I think we do it for both.
All new housing is desirable and helps us fulfill that housing policy, you know, housing set of policy goals. But obviously we want to see more, and we want to make it easier for the middle housing so that we can get those more affordable units produced. But that doesn't mean that we don't want any new housing. And so I think that we probably could relax that prohibition, you know, even for single dwellings. And it's just someone would have to come in, if someone wants to build a single dwelling, you know, within that setback that, or, less than 30 feet from the front property line or the rear property line, they just have to come to the planning commission and get a type 3 variance approved.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
You know,
I think that's a totally fair compromise and good way to look at this, that, I understand the objective of trying to get the middle house. So you're gonna give them a break, by, making it easier on these lots, and then if we have a variance process for single-family dwelling and for, the middle housing units, then, I think that's a fair compromise.
If I could, just for clarification, the variances that are prohibited right now have to do with the lot itself. So it's lot width and lot depth and lot area. Those are the ones that are prohibited, and those are the ones that we circled back and said, no, those are okay, subject to type 3. The setback variance that you're talking about is already permitted as a type 2 variance, and we've issued them.
Oh,
And there's a mathematical variance,
Okay.
so you can reduce right now via type 2, those 30-foot setbacks down to 22.5. And we've done those on a couple of places, in a couple of occasions, so.
And since we're changing our zoning to basically an R5, right, throughout,
Basically,
then those standards of the 10,000 square foot lot, you know, in an R10,
right,
now have gone away and they're 5,000, so if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you could split it up in half anyways now, right? Am I following that correctly?
general, yeah, subject to the standards and
So
so
it
on.
kind of takes away that variance process anyways.
For those, I think all I was speaking about was just specifically to flag lots, and the
Right,
setbacks,
right.
are currently permitted via type 2 variance. I just wanted to make that clear, that those wouldn't be coming to the planning commission, or at least they don't now. And it doesn't seem like that's where we're headed, so,
Yeah, I must have misread that. So variances of lot area, lot width, and lot depth standards
Yeah.
are prohibited for backlots. And I'm totally cool with those standards being variable.
great, okay, good.
Do we have any other outstanding questions, Vera?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only other one I wanted to just understand, was if folks have an opinion on using the pole area to be part of the overall minimum lot area calculation or not. So that's, you know,
So just on the margin, you're talking about getting an additional unit for a flag lot that, absent the pole, has, you know, almost 7,000 square feet or almost
Right.
5,000 square feet. And the flagpole could count and get you over that threshold, get you that extra unit.
right,
And none of that matters if Commissioner Hemer and I get our way and make it to where you can put a quadplex on a 3,000 square foot lot, right?
right. Still an outstanding question. We'll be talking about that, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, you are
Okay, so-
taxed, you're, as a flag lot owner, you are taxed on your driveway, so it might as well count for something. I say, go ahead and let it be. I like the proposal.
Agreed.
Okay,
Yeah, I've no objections to that whatsoever.
okay. And then I guess I just wanted to circle back on the idea of allowing backlots in new subdivisions. Currently, flag lots are prohibited in a new subdivision. You can't propose a flag lot within a new subdivision. Should we allow backlots, in a new subdivision? I guess to that point, should we be allowing flag lots in a new subdivision? But we were specifically asking about backlots because, you know, again, they're incentivized, you know, to be only for middle housing. So do we want to allow a Cheragino Farms type situation in a new subdivision in the city? I guess is the way I'll phrase that question. What do we think?
I mean, there's not a whole lot of opportunities, I think, although there are some probably. And so I guess, you know, if you're looking at some of those large site redevelopments, you know, within the city's UGMA or within the city itself, I guess the problem that really comes into play with this is block size, right? And how big the blocks are, and the connectivity with the blocks. And so I think that as long as you're meeting those connectivity goals, I mean, this is a tough thing to say too, I think, because, you know, I like the idea, you know, I mean, and it's not all about me and what I like, but, you know, the eyes on the street, you know, the policy objectives of having the accepted standards, you know, the crime prevention through environmental design, you know, standards where, you know, the houses are up close, you see what's going on in the street and you have that security that way. You know, that's lost when we do these flag lots and rear lots. And so I think that although I don't want to pretend that we can anticipate every scenario, I feel like that is an important policy objective, you know, to try to get houses, closer to the street, in the front. But maybe there's some kind of alleyway design or something, where, what I mean? It's like, again, it's like there's so many different creative ways you could approach subdivision design, but I don't want to rule these out of hand. I just want to make sure that we're satisfying the important policy objectives. And connectivity, pedestrian connectivity is absolutely one of those where we need to make sure the block sizes aren't too large. But, there's a trade-off to not having eyes on the street, and that's an important consideration, and maybe there should be a couple hurdles to putting flag lots in a new subdivision. Maybe you should have to show that you're doing something different, that, makes up for not, kind of fulfilling that policy objective, but maybe you're doing something else instead to mitigate for that.
Vice Chair Edge, is it all right if I say something? Yeah, I see. So I just wanted to add that I think that flag lots basically came about because it was already on pieces of property that had already been developed. Whereas when we're going in and doing to subdivisions, I think it's important to figure out what is the right design, not trying to fill in holes, like trying to put in density where density didn't exist. So I would just think, after going and looking at things and trying to think about flag lots, is that the kind of development we want in the city? Right. Or do we want it to be, like you said, Commissioner Edge, do we want the eyes on the street? Do we want the frontage on the street? So what are the policy objectives, and does flag lots get us there, or do they not? So maybe we could come back, we could think about that a little bit and bring back kind of our thoughts on that to the hearing for you all.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna look at policy, so I look at it this way. It seems to me that if we allow backlots, we certainly eliminate a lot of road surface that gets put in. So from an environmental point of view, it seems to me that you would end up with a lot more vegetation and a lot more trees with the backlots being allowed than you would, because if you have enough connectivity right on both sides where everybody's eyes on the street, those houses would be back to back. You'd have to put in a whole nother road. And so it seems from an environmental point of view, the less the road surface, the less water runoff, the less kind of that kind of stuff is more desirable. But we can, right, this is another one of those things where you look at these two, how do you rate connectivity against the environment, or, what policies say that we can, what policy says, and so, yeah, maybe a little bit of a deeper dive into that, I guess.
Okay.
All this series of trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
You
Right,
get
it's a
one thing, you
series
get
of
less of
trade-offs,
another,
right.
like, so what do we weigh at? What's most important at the
Right,
end of the day?
and if you haven't guessed by now, I really, flag lots, back lots, they don't bother me in one bit at all. So, I understand the eyes on the street, but you're always gonna have those houses in front that are the eyes on the street. And it is weird when you live in a back lot or in you have to make an attempt to get to know your neighbors because you have no idea what goes on in the street. But nowadays with cameras, if I wanted to point a camera down my driveway and watch, if I really cared what happened out there, I could, I guess, and watch the footage when I wake up in the morning, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm thinking of is that if there was some particularly, if there was a site that had, some geographic or geological constraints or natural area constraints, it might make sense to have, a flag lot or a back lot type setup to where you don't, they can reach their minimum density, but not have to put in as much road surface, like Commissioner Hemer was saying, in order to access all of those lots in a normal, grid. And maybe, so I feel like having it available for a creative approach could be really helpful, to be able to do backlots or flag lots in a new subdivision. Although I agree it shouldn't perhaps be, kind of the default choice that the code offers.
Okay.
I see.
Okay,
Now, are we talking just for middle housing though, right?
for backlots, that was the idea.
Only for middle housing, so not
Correct.
single-family dwellings?
Correct, right. At least that's how we pitched it, that yes, that backlots, should backlots be permitted in new subdivision? And again, coming back to backlots are only permitted for middle housing. So that's,
I'd
again, a
honestly be
proposal.
okay if backlots were just basically flag lots with, you know, with the easement on the parent lot's property. You know, I know that we, you know, again, we're trying to find ways to incentivize middle housing, and we should continue doing that, and that should still be part of what we're putting forward. But I would also be okay with a single unit dwelling on a backlot.
Okay.
You know, again, provided that it's you know, we feel like it, however we're setting it up, that it's satisfying, you know, our policy objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been biting my tongue a lot about, you know, in this conversation, because we're not ready to talk about habitat connectivity and wildlife corridors and those other policies that will be a forthcoming phase of comp plan implementation. But, you know, yeah, it pained me as I was talking about screening to not be talking about wildlife connectivity and habitat connectivity at the same time. But, you know, we're not really there yet, and I have to, you know, accept that. But, you know, there's a lot of conversations to have around, you know, how the impacts of these kinds of developments on the habitat connectivity as well. And so I know we'll come back around and have more conversations around these, but I still feel like, you know, that having, it doesn't need to be limited to middle housing, although middle housing can qualify you for the by right reduction in the setback, you know, for instance, but otherwise I'm fine with these types of lots accommodating residences, full stop.
Okay.
Yeah, I can agree with that as well, Chairman Edge.
I shared the same opinion.
Okay, so backlots can just be permitted. They're not solely for middle housing? Is that the direction I'm hearing? Just want to make sure I have that right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll have some of these built-in incentives, you know, the setbacks and so on for middle housing, but the creation of a backlot is okay regardless of what you're putting on it. Okay?
Right,
It's a flag lot. The only thing that distinguishes it is the flagpole ownership.
Okay.
right, so still 30 feet for a single-family residence and 20 feet for a middle housing choice in a backlot,
Okay.
right?
Also, I like the idea of combining the driveways, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity, you know, Commissioner Hamer might feel differently about this, you know, living in this type of situation, but if the parent lot can be accessed from the rear, then they can take access from the flagpole and combining them that way. And maybe that only really applies I know that we still have situations where, you know, a driveway already exists to a garage that already exists, and there's nothing we can do about that, and so the flagpole comes off the side. But for new subdivisions that do this, absolutely requiring them to combine these driveways into as few as possible.
Yep.
Would be preferable.
Yeah, that's already written into the code.
Yep.
And that's what I would give kudos to the 3G on page 8, which is my little pet peeve, that we do require on the front house or whoever owns the pole, that the person that does not own the pole is required to have a parking spot so that they don't block the
Yep,
driveway.
and they would have to. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Make sure of that.
Any other questions for us on backlots or flag lots, Vera?
I have one general question. I don't know if we're at the general question, but can somebody explain what 17.28.707, the flag lot and backlot limitations means? Because didn't you write it in there that it's gonna be allowed in the subdivision, the very last statement, highlighted in yellow? Didn't you already say that it was gonna be allowed after January 1st of 2022?
Yes, yep, no, I missed that reference, so you're right.
Good catch.
I will
Okay,
change it.
all right.
Yep.
Good catch.
If it wasn't highlighted in yellow, I never
we're
would have
not
gotten it, so you
Yep,
didn't have to.
Got
Jen.
it, thank you.
We haven't talked about land divisions yet, right, Vera?
No, and we can, I mean, there aren't a lot of sections, as far as the Title 17 section, the Title 17 section that I've done, that was in the code that you received as part of this, staff report, was specific to the backlot section. There weren't any other changes to Title 17 that I've proposed as part of this code amendment, other than the backlot
Okay.
stuff, yeah.
So do you want to talk about the natural resource?
Yeah, we can talk about that next. Yes. I only have one slide that has to do with that, actually. Let me figure out. There we go.
Oh, did I miss a natural resource?
Wait, am I still? Okay. All right. Am I sharing my screen right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Can everyone see the presentation?
Not yet.
No, that's what I thought. Okay. Okay. So, all right. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a stupid question. Was that not in our packet, or was that in the previous packet?
What, the natural resources?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was, so the natural resources section, was in there wasn't any additional thing that went with the staff report. It was in the big mother code amendment package that,
Okay.
that you received earlier.
Thank you.
Yeah, no.
I just wanted.
It's a good question, thank you. Yeah, no, as far as the natural resources section goes for the code amendments, we haven't proposed any substantive amendments. We've made some references to the new tree code throughout, and we've made revisions to the habitat conservation area disturbance calculation to make sure that we've included middle housing as part of that, mathematical calculation, because that calculation currently is just for, single family or single unit homes. We do propose a much more substantial review when we do the sort of overall natural resources review section that Chair Edge just mentioned, where we'll be covering the needed housing statute, clear and objective standards for development in the water quality resource area, that 2-track process that we've talked about before. We're proposing that happen within the overall natural resources code section, that portion of the implementation. And that's slated right now for 2023, which feels actually really close. I know it sounds like it's really far away. It's actually not that far away. But that's our pitch. So I don't know if folks have questions about, the natural resources section, or are there other things that, we ought to be looking at? But that's how we've proposed it for this package of amendments right now.
Have we successfully remedied that issue where the minimum density can be calculated as greater than the maximum density?
Oh, in
natural resource?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to go back to that. Yes, I'm glad you've asked that question. I'm going to go back and revisit that tomorrow and make sure that, how we've proposed that and cover that. Thank you for bringing that up. I looked at it and then
It feels related enough
Yep.
to housing that
Yep.
we can justify doing it as part of this.
Agreed. Yep.
And so with that fixed, I think that we actually have, the protection that we need to make sure that we can, forge ahead with, middle housing and the natural resources standards that we basically have in place, I think. So
Yep. Agreed. Thank you.
I've been hammering on that for a while, and I feel like if we just remedy that one thing, I think we'll be in a good enough spot
Yep.
with it.
No, we'll have that for you, and we'll have that in
any-
the hearing draft. Yep.
Cool. Any other questions on natural resources?
No, but
There's not
I
much
will.
there to question.
I'm sorry. I will always make my statement. I wish that the yellow little lines weren't drawn from a Google map, and that we actually went out there and measured them and put them in the right spot where they should be. That's all I have to say. Thank you. I know it won't be part of this package.
So I just want to verify confirm what the city's process is for this, because I imagine it has to exist. The county has a process for a habitat conservation area map verification.
Yes.
And it's an application itself where you just go in and define what you see on the ground and how that relates, and it updates the maps for the purposes of that site.
Yes. And we have that
City
as
has
well.
something substantially similar. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Yep, yep. And we've had folks do that,
The-
take that on, actually, parking lots and that sort of thing. We've had folks come in and sort of, and verify the boundary and in fact change it because of existing development that's on the ground. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. I think we're good then.
All right. And then the final thing I wanted to, sorry, I'm gonna go back and change, now let's share the screen again, is I just wanted to, while we were on the topic of land division, there was information in the staff report that provided an overview, of Senate Bill 458, which is the expedited land division, code.
We're seeing your presenter view again.
Ugh, all right. It doesn't matter at this point. So Senate
We can
Bill.
zoom in if we need to.
Yeah, that's fine. So Senate Bill 458 relates directly to Title 17. So this was signed into law right around Memorial Day, and it has to do with cities applying an expedited land division process to middle housing land divisions. I wanted the commission to be aware of Senate Bill 458 and what it does, and that we are aware of it. We're still working through what all of it means. DLCD is also working through what all of it means. A lot of us have questions on our monthly Zoom meeting with DLCD about what does this mean for us? A lot of communities have a lot of questions, mostly about what happens with a cottage cluster and if someone wants to come in and do a land division for a cottage cluster. So DLCD is still working on guidance. Our goal was to incorporate amendments into this package to account for Senate Bill 458, but we may have to return to it in the spring because DLCD is still working through kind of what a lot of this stuff means as it relates to the Senate bill, and we need more guidance from DLCD before we know exactly what it means. I think what it will mean for us is making sure that we have kind of I guess we'll call it a type 2 process for land divisions of any number of lots. That's really the idea of an expedited land division, is that it compresses the review time. Right now, there is an expedited land division process for affordable housing, like income restricted housing. And the idea is to use that same process for middle housing. And basically it compresses the review period down to 63 days. So we still need to work through kind of what all that means. There are some specific things that the Senate bill says that we are allowed to ask for or require within a subdivision, and some things that we're not allowed to ask for. One of the key examples that I would give you is that as part of a land division, the city can't require parking to be on each individual lot that results from the land division. You can still require parking, of course, but that parking can be in a parking lot that all of the units share, and then you of course can require the easements or whatever to make sure that all of the lots have access to that parking. But as a result of the subdivision, you can't require that the required parking is on each individual lot. That's an example of some of the things that the Senate bill, precludes us from requiring. So we need to go through it more carefully. We're one of many communities that have a lot of questions about how this works. So we will try to incorporate it here, but I think what is more likely is that we will be coming back in the spring with a very targeted set of code amendments that relates specifically to this, so that we're, in line with the June 30th deadline for this. So I just wanted to make sure that the commission was generally aware of what this thing is, and that we are too, and we're still figuring it out, as is everyone else, I guess, at this point.
As are the rule makers.
Yes, yeah, so, yeah, we're all still trying to figure it out at this point. And then I'll just hit the last slide, and then I'll stop sharing and we won't share anymore. And we can talk about whatever else we need to talk about. I just wanted to, include the next steps. So we're still kind of in this process. We've got one more, work session scheduled, with the commission. And then the hope is that at that point, at the conclusion of that, we will have a refined final draft, that we will post, for a public hearing in October. Is the goal. We'll see if that's where we end up, but that's our general, thought process for now. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we can get out of here. There.
Awesome, thanks, Vera.
Okay, yeah.
So the SB 458, I'm really glad to see that the legislature came back around to deal with land divisions, for middle housing, because so many of my unanswered questions were around land divisions. So I appreciate that, we're getting some clarity there forthcoming. That may offer us some direction, though, on another thing that we had been discussing, which is the possibility of ADUs for middle housing primary, dwellings, and how to, structure that. And so with land divisions kind of spelling out, or with the state spelling out how the land divisions can occur for ownership units, then I think that's, I think we'll probably get some guidance embedded in that, but also it feels like maybe, to me, it feels intuitively like maybe we should be looking at attached ADUs being kind of the defining, how do you get an ADU from in a duplex or a triplex? Well, each primary unit has an ADU attached to it. And in an ownership model where this land SB 458 applies, and you divide out, the land underneath each unit of a triplex or whatever, then the ADU for that primary unit would be on the deed coupled with that primary unit and not able to be removed from it and sold separately or owned separately from the primary unit. So that's, I think, how we could start to add some definition around how you have attached middle housing, dwellings with ADUs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier this week.
It looks like the state is advocating for rear lots as well, because they're saying that you can't require frontage on all lots, under these. And so it seems like we're doing appropriate things, that our timing is good to deal with a lot of these things.
Yep. I hope so. Yes. Yeah.
The other thing I saw is that when I looked this up, I think on the ORS for this, that it does actually call out that it's land committed to a residential use, but not necessarily land that's serving other goal protected lands. So like goal 5, goal 6, goal 7 lands are not subject to these same expedited land division requirements. So, so anyway, it seems like the state kind of caught up with some of those concerns that we've been raising, and this seems to address some of those. So I'm happy for that. And if we want to try to foreshadow any of that and get that into our code ahead of schedule, it's probably okay. If we wanted to try to figure out, the ADUs for middle housing units or whatever, I think that's okay to try to get out ahead of, as well as, the back lots. I appreciate Commissioner Sherman's comments around trying to do more outreach around backlots, and we probably could, particularly in the Ardenwald area. But I also feel like the state's sending a pretty strong signal that we're going to need to accommodate that type in new land divisions. So we might as well figure out how we're going to do that and move ahead with it. As well as protecting our other goal protected lands. I'm really glad to see that we have the ability that even if land is already committed to a residential use, that we can still protect the goal 5 resources or the goal, even the goal 15 resources for the Willamette Greenway was on that list.
Yes.
So, So I talked a lot. Anyone else have any comments about land divisions or SB 458 or anything else that we've talked about before we go? Greg.
Commissioner Sherman's comments, plus to what was said at the last meeting, if we could really get an answer to the question, if we change all the residential zones from 5, 7, 10 to MD, does every house get notification?
We talked about this, and we will be providing direct notice in advance of the public hearings to all residential properties in the city.
All right,
We've
so-
already talked about that, yeah.
And I think that will help get to Commissioner Sherman's issue of the back, because you can't just go drive around and pick out, right, what, or I guess you Google it now and say, oh, well, let's talk to these people. But I think that will give everybody the opportunity to be able to speak about it, and then they will give their relative experience from the property that they own. Does that make sense? So I'm glad that everybody in the residential area, I mean, I don't know if I'm glad, but I'm glad that that got settled out and that was
Yep.
decided.
Yep.
That will help, I guess.
And Commissioner Massey, I saw you raised your hand too.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking through, the public meeting here. And so just sort of a general observation is that we have gone through a really extensive process. Everyone's done a lot of good work on the various committees and the city staff, and getting us to this point where we're actually, writing code. I think that as we go through, the process and actually start, putting things into code, I think that I won't call them surprises, but they're things that are revealed that we weren't maybe, didn't think about before, the prime example being just the number of zones that we're going to have. And some of the more details about things like flag lots and that kind of thing. And so there's some level of detail, and I'm just wondering if, rather than saying we're having a public meeting and here's 75 pages of stuff that we're going to talk about, is there a way to put together, an executive summary that says these are the more significant items that are being considered for the code, one, for just clarity, and to elicit participation in the October public hearing.
Yes.
Because there's just a lot of detail here. And, we're swimming trying to keep up with it. And I think folks who aren't involved in this are not going to have a handle on it, but there's certain things we might want to highlight to the public. And I'm just not sure how we do that. I was thinking, well, does the NDA meeting, does that precede the October public hearing enough so that we could at least get it to the NDA leaders? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you raised a really good point. I think what we would like to do, we've been using the Engage Milwaukee website as a way of creating, these kind of executive summaries, or sort of one-pagers, I'll call them, sort of summaries. And I think what we could do, as a suggestion, and I think this is something we'll brainstorm back at the office too, are the different ways that we can get those executive summary, how do we get that information out? Post it on, on Engage Milwaukee, email blasts, share it with the NDAs to share with their folks. Our goal is to go to the NDAs, and present, to them, when they come back from the summer break. As a reminder, we've been there twice, with each of them already. Now we come back when we have the public hearing scheduled, and, and again, hit the highlights, right? So hit the, kind of the big picture, the top 10 list of things that we're changing kind of idea, to get folks sort of back from the summer and back into thinking about the code like we have this whole time. But I think you've made a really good point. We don't want to just sort of let people know that here's 80 pages of code for you to go read. I think sort of like a top 10 list or an executive summary is a great idea. And I think that's something we can certainly put together. We've been using that sort of format for a lot of, our information already. And so we can certainly do that, and make a concerted effort to get that information out there. It's a great, great idea. Yeah, and we will definitely do that.
Unmute.
Yeah, I'm all for using all of those, communication channels and everything like that, but, we just need to talk it up.
Yeah.
At the market and, if we ever have First Friday again and all of that, those kinds of places, we need to talk to our neighbors and hopefully do some, word of mouth, get folks out to the public hearing kind of thing, because, not everyone's gonna, go to the Engage Milwaukee website.
Right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ert, I see your hand.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm always available to do outreach to the community. So just anything that you want out there, just literally kind of have to put it in front of my face sometimes, and then I can, talk to the community about it. So, yeah, I'll help
Great.
in any way I can.
Just don't email it to her.
Well,
Don't email it.
So that was actually going to be my question. Commissioner Ert, if email doesn't work because your inbox is totally overwhelmed, and I understand that, what does that mean when you say I need to get it in front of your face? How do I do that? What's the mechanism to do that?
I mean, texting me or DMing me is probably the easiest way. I mean, like, that I will see it for sure. But if you, like, in the subtitle or something, just address me very, like, in all caps, that I know it's not like a full blast, like, get my attention and say, can you put this in the group?
Mm-hmm.
Then, then I'll be more likely to see it. But if it's like a full blast to everybody, I get a lot of those, and so I just kind of skim through. But I can also try and have the conversation with the community, or, start the conversation, at least the outline of the conversation, and let them also have it about kind of attending this and
Okay.
getting more involved. So I can do that.
All right.
Thank you.
I may follow up my email with a phone call.
I'm gonna say the
If
good old fashioned way.
telephone works, I'm just
Yeah,
gonna do that too. Okay,
yeah.
great.
Probably definitely the most effective way to get a hold of me.
Perfect.
for sure.
Okay.
And if I could, Chair Adjunct, to Commissioner Massey's point, as we all write, we look at through the lens of the way that we see the world, and it does have opinions. So when you put together your executive summary, don't be too generic, because then it will just slide right on over them. And I understand not being too specific, but you should give the pros and the cons, kind of the concept. You gotta lay out why we are doing this, because we're told to, right?
Yep.
And then, be honest with, we've all gone through these pros and cons. And then that will probably help people, with their own opinion, to be able to, maybe want to dig in a little bit further into the information, I guess.
If I may I use the phrase trade-offs?
Yes,
Instead
that's
of
fine,
pros
that's
and
perfect,
cons?
that's fine.
That's just, while we're talking about sort of the tone
Yeah,
of what
well,
we're doing.
You're much
Yeah.
better in the use of government ease.
No,
so.
it's, yeah.
Anything else on the comp plan before we move on?
Not for me.
Do you feel like you have sufficient information from us, Vera,
I
for
do.
what you were hoping for tonight?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
This-
great.
been great.
Again, great conversations, folks. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, then we'll move on. Do commissioners or staff have any other business or updates?
I just wanted to let everybody know that apparently tonight the city council has gone back. They've decided that they are not meeting in person until at least December. We had that brief moment where we opened back up, and it was really exciting, and everybody was really excited. And I think that there's a little bit of leeriness about that, and so it's going back, so we can have a conversation about this next time, about what the planning commission would like to do. I don't know that we've been given any mandate to meet in person, so we might just want to talk about it next time we meet. Just want to let everybody know.
If I may make a suggestion, why don't we just go ahead and make that decision tonight and just say, you know what, we'll go back to Zoom. And hopefully by the time that the public, forum for the comp plan comes out, that we can meet in person. And by the way, this is the first planning commission I've had pants on in like the last 16 months. It's kind of weird.
I think my first one, I literally was wearing pajama bottoms, my first one ever, and I went to let the dog out.
Exactly. Do any other commissioners have any opinion about that?
No, I agree. I think that it's needed right now. We're not going back into in-person right now.
I guess the safest thing to do, but you know, ultimately, whatever the city decides to do, I'm, you know, still full remote, you know, for the foreseeable future. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, if other people feel comfortable with that, then, you know, I defer to others, but I honestly feel the safest and smartest thing that we could do is probably go back to full remote for a while.
Sounds like we've got a little bit of agreement on that, so we will just assume that we're going back to Zoom. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. That was the only thing I had.
I enjoy the hybrid experiment. And I want to continue to refine the hybrid meeting. But
So do
not
we.
at the cost of people's
Yeah.
safety.
Yeah, and to be honest, if I had a choice of being able to sit at home without pants on and not have to wear a mask, than to be here and, you know, take a shower and put on pants and have to wear a mask, I'd much rather not have to wear the mask, so.
Yeah, mask.
We'll get there eventually.
Commissioner Massey.
I want to extend congratulations to Vera and the Canadian women's soccer team. Last week I was cranky that Megan Rapinoe and the ladies team were not going to get to the goal round, so I was cranky but well done, well done.
It was a heck of a game. Thank you, Commissioner Massey, appreciate it.
Any other items for discussion from the commission? Kind of last call. Okay, so meeting, Greg, do I see your hand? No, okay, so meeting forecast.
All right, coming up August 24th, it's comp plan implementation again. We're going to talk about the tree code and the design and the development standards. That'll be a really good conversation. September 14th is a variance request from Bonaventure Senior Living to not have pervious pavement for the walkways. And then on September 28th, tentatively, not sure this is exactly going to happen, but we're looking at the development review for Coho Point, which is really exciting for the city. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is October 21st is looking like a really good date for the joint Planning Commission NDA meeting. I've talked to Jason in communications and to look at the calendar, and it looks like right now that looks pretty good. So I'm going to be communicating out to the neighborhood NDAs this week that that's what we're proposing. And I think what we'll do is once we've had that meeting, then I want to start having the Community Involvement Advisory Committee slot in every agenda for the Planning Commission, but I want to be sure that the NDAs know what the purpose of that is. So I think it'll be great when we talk about that on October 21st. And then starting after that, we'll have a time frame on each of the Planning Commission agendas where the Planning Commission can meet for a few minutes if anyone has things that they want to bring to you as the CIAC. So that's what I'm proposing for now with that. Okay, he's looking at me like he has questions.
I'm the only one she could stare at right in the eye.
Exactly.
I'm okay with it, I guess.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
So I think the city council also established a DEI committee recently. Is that correct?
I believe that's in process. I don't know the details of that, but yes, I believe that is in process.
Yeah, I think the applications are gonna be going out here
Okay.
shortly, if I remember the communication correctly.
And I can give
Okay, cool. That's really great to hear.
and I can give a little update about that actually at the next meeting. We can just let you know where we are in the process with that. But someone else will do that though,
That'd be great.
because I'm not here the next 2 meetings, just so you all are aware. I think I mentioned it last time, but Vera will be here and then Brett will be here for the other meeting.
Okay. Well, enjoy your time away.
Thank you.
And I think I need a motion for us to adjourn unless there's anything else.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion from Commissioner Ert. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Massey. And all those in favor? Say aye, raise your hand. All right, unanimous to adjourn. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
night.
Good night.